Okay, so in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at GDP, which is gross domestic product, and we're also going to be looking at GNP, gross national product, which is also known as GNI, which is gross national income. So we're going to spend some time talking about these concepts and talking about how we can compare numbers over time and see what that gives us. So the first thing we'll do is look at GDP and what that is. All right, so GDP stands for gross, meaning total, national. I'm sorry, skipping ahead here. Try that again. Stands for gross domestic, sorry, meaning within the country's borders, and product, stuff we produce. And so, in general, what I want you to always think and keep in the back of your head is that GDP measures output, okay, how much we produce as a country. There's a more technical definition we'll get to in just a second, but I always want you to remember that when we look at GDP, it is measuring a country's output. All right, so let's look at that technical definition. It is the GDP is the total dollar value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given time period. It's usually measured every quarter, which is every 3 months, or it's measured every year. So let's take a look at what this definition really means. All right, and so it's the total dollar value. All right, and so we're measuring this in dollars. So when you hear what is GDP, we're not talking about units of things produced or anything. We're just talking about the dollar value of everything that has been produced. All right, so it's the total dollar value of all final goods and services. And so this is one of the more, I won't say more important concepts, but when we talk about a final good and service, all right, let's think about Ford Motor Company, and they're producing a car. All right, whatever. Well, let's just make it a truck now because that's looking more like a truck. And so they're producing a truck, and this is a F-150. And let's say that that Ford says, you know what, we need to buy our windshields. So they buy this windshield from some outside supplier, and they pay $300 for it. All right. So then they put this windshield in there, and then when they price the car, they say, okay, the price is going to be, well, let's add up the windshield and the tires and the engine and everything else, and we'll come up with a price of, 25,000 bucks, for example. And so when we look at these two things, this windshield would be considered the intermediate good, and that is it's a product that's taken and used in the production of something else that's going to be sold later. All right, and so Ford takes this intermediate good and turns it into part of a final good. And the reason that we don't count these intermediate goods is that this 25,000, part of it is this 300 from the windshield over here. And so if we counted the windshield here and then we counted the price of the car here, we'd be double counting. Okay, we'd be counting too much because this windshield is taken into account when they price it at $25,000. All right. And so that's what we mean by a final good. Birdhouses would be another example. You go and buy the wood for the birdhouse. You don't want to count the dollar value of the wood that you buy and then count it again when you sell your birdhouse, because you're going to be taking that into consideration when you set the price of your birdhouse. So that's the total dollar value, okay, measured in dollars, bad circle, of all final goods and services. And goods, we can have durable. These are 3-year things that last 3 years or more. Non-durable, less than 3 years. Goods, so final goods and services. Services would be things like going to the doctor, the dentist, or getting a haircut, or whatever, any kind of service. Produced, made in a country. So we're talking about within the borders of a country, and so we have a BMW plant close to us, and so it's a German company, but the BMWs that they produce within that plant, that factory, are counted towards the United States gross domestic product, because we want to look at what is produced in our country. All right, and in any given time. And so, like I say, this is either every 3 months, which is every quarter, or this is measured typically once a year. So when we look at GDP numbers, you'll see quarterly GDP or yearly GDP. All right, and so that's the technical definition. Now, today's current GDP is somewhere around 15, let's, yeah, $15.3 trillion. All right, and so that's a pretty big number. We are the biggest country by far, and this is what they call nominal, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. This is our nominal GDP. So we're at about 15.3 trillion. In 2011, we were at, I think, let's see, it was 15, basically 15 trillion. All right, and so we've grown a little bit in the last 6 or 8 months. All right, so the next one we want to look at is GNP, which is gross national product. Okay, and so by national, what we want to measure here is everything that is produced, the dollar value of everything produced by people of a country. And so in the U.S., we want to look at the dollar value of everything that Americans produce. And so there might be a Nike factory in China, and we want to look at the earnings from that factory, you know, the money that that factory gets minus what they pay out to all the workers. And so, in short, what we're looking at, and they don't use gross national product so much anymore, they're starting to switch to something called GNI, which is gross national income. All right, this is what we're going to use in our class from now on. Okay, these are saying the same thing, and so how this works is they just say, look, if Americans are producing all of this stuff, remember the money that they're getting for that becomes their income. And so this is just saying, let's look at Americans' income. And so one easy way, this is not the best way to look at it, but to take GNI is to look at GDP plus income earned abroad. Now that is a very general way of looking at it. There would be another, you would want to get it more correct, you'd have to say, okay, we also need to take out, so less foreign income earned in the U.S. And so any of the profits earned in, we'll just say U.S., any profits like the BMW factory that we were talking about, the factory workers that work there in Spartanburg, their salary would go towards gross national income, and so that's why a lot of what they produce there, part of the GDP, goes towards gross national income, because a lot of the money goes back into the factory and their suppliers that are here. But some of the profits, whatever profits go back to Germany, we would have to take those out of GNI, all right, because that's not income earned by Americans. All right, and so these are the two concepts. We're going to be looking primarily at GDP and primarily at GNI, gross national income. And so we'll just take, let's take, give me just a second. Let's take this definition, GDP plus income earned abroad, and just use that, realizing that it's not perfect. All right, there's some drawbacks to making it that short, but just for our purposes, that's what we're going to do. All right, so next we want to look at, whoops, let me go back and just say that in 2011, our gross national income was somewhere around, let's change colors, $15.097 trillion. All right, which is a lot. Now, here's a good question for you. Should the gross national income be similar to the GDP? Obviously, because all we're adding to it for the most part is income earned abroad, and we're taking out foreign income earned in the U.S. All right. Now let's go over to the next slide here. We want to be able to distinguish between the nominal value of GDP and the real value. All right. These are two concepts you're going to have to get good at. All right. So let me just start off with a simple example. Back in 1977, when I was a very small child, okay, uh, whenever I went to see the movies, all right, we went to go see some movies. I think Star Wars came out around that time. Movies cost, I believe it was $2.50, if my memory serves correctly. And so this is back in 1977. And today, so 1977, today movies cost somewhere around $10.50. All right, so it's 2012. And so what we want to look at is it fair to say that we're paying, almost 5 times more, 4 times more in movie tickets today? Does it hurt us 4 times more than it did back in 1977 when I was a kid? And so this is, when we look at the actual dollar value of the time, all right, that's what we call the nominal value. So nominal is just the dollar value at the given time. And so if we look at the nominal price of a ticket in 1977, we would say that it's $2.50. The nominal value today is $10.50. And so, a gallon of gas back then may have cost 30 cents to be the nominal value, whereas today it costs, $3.35, something like that. That's the nominal value. Now, what I want you to ask yourself, is this a fair comparison between $2.50 and $10.50? Because you know that what's happened to the value of a dollar since 1977, that 250, could you buy more with 250 back then, or could you buy more with $2.50 today? And obviously the answer to that is, back then $2.50 was worth more. And so what we want to do is is to be able to find some way to compare these. So the best way that I can think to explain this is to say, you know what, let's pretend that movies came out at the same time. Let's pretend that it came out today. All right, and so there's a way that we can calculate what this $2.50 would convert to today if we applied the inflation that's taken place over these years, 25, what is that, 35 years, thereabouts. It's been a long time since I was a little kid. So anyway, so what we want to say is, how much is 250? 250 back then is worth how much today? And there's a formula that does this. And if you recall back, we haven't done much of it. We did it a few years ago. The CPI, the Consumer Price Index, allows us, it's a measure of inflation, and it allows us to take these values from one period, and put them in terms of values of another. And so, to make a long story short, or a long story not quite as long, this $2.50, if we convert it, it actually turns into, it would be worth $9.50 today. All right. And so now we can say, look, let's pretend that I fast forward in time from 1977 to 2012, and if I went to see a movie, I would only be paying $9.50, whereas you guys are paying $10.50. Okay, so now are these two numbers a good comparison for each other? Can we say, who's paying more, who's paying less at their time? Okay, and so today you'd say, you know what, you guys are paying $1 more than I was back then. All right, in real terms, and that's the key. This is a real value. All right, when we convert, so let me just say here, real values, take away the effects of inflation. All right, or you'll see it worded adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation. All right, so real values that's what we want to look at, because real values allow us to compare things over time. Another example I like to give, sticking with the movie theme, what is the highest grossing movie of all time? So, highest grossing movie of all time. All right, I checked on Wikipedia the other day, and let me ask you this. Do you think it could be a movie from 1950, or do you think it's more likely to be a movie from the 2000s? All right, hopefully you said the 2000s, because if all we're looking at is simply how many dollars got brought in, well, the price of a movie ticket today is about $10.50. from 1950, it might have been a buck, 25 or something. And so today's, the movies that were just released recently are gonna be higher grossing simply because the tickets cost more. And so the highest grossing movie ever is Avatar. All right, I forget the actual number. I think I wrote it down. $2.8 billion. They've grossed $2.8 billion, which is a whole lot of money. And that was from 2009. All right, now what I want you to ask yourself is this the highest grossing movie ever if we adjust for inflation? Okay, so let's pretend that all the movies came out today. All the movies in history came out today, and they sold the same tickets, same number of tickets, and all the tickets cost the same. And so now that kind of puts us on a level playing field. Now we can say we're talking about real values. And so do you think Avatar is the highest grossing movie ever? All right, now you have to think about going back all through time. And so the biggest grossing movie ever is Gone with the Wind. And if you adjust for inflation, this came out in 1939. If you adjust for inflation when ticket prices were $1, then Gone with the Wind has earned $3.3 billion. All right, so it didn't earn nominally $3.3 billion, but if you take this ticket price and what they earned in 1939 and adjusted it up for inflation, then they end up with $3.3 billion. All right, now how does this relate to what we're doing with GDP and gross national income? Let me clear this page and show you. So let's look at GDP from 1977. We'll stick back then. And so the nominal, if you looked at GDP, the nominal GDP in 1977 was 1917 billion. So this is kind of like saying $1.9 trillion. All right. Excuse me for just a second. Well, I'll just talk through that. And so today, in 2012, our nominal, remind me to turn the ringer off next time, the nominal GDP in 2012 is somewhere around 15.3 trillion. Okay, so here's the 1.9 and 15.3. So does that mean that it's almost 2? Does that mean that our economy has grown almost a little over 7-fold over what we did in 1977? And the answer is no. All right, and so what we want to do is pretend that all of these, everything that was produced in each year, let's put it in terms of 1 year's value of $1. And what they do is put that in 2005 dollars. Okay, so we pretend that what was produced in 1977 sold at the value of $1 from 2005. What was produced in 2012 sold at the value of 2005. And so when we convert this, we get the real value. So the real value of GDP in 1977, when we convert it, is about 5.2 trillion. Okay, and so you can see that that's a lot more. And the the real GDP in 2012 is 13.5 trillion. Okay, and so now these are the numbers. These are the numbers that we want to look at. All right, because now we can start to compare. We can say, you know what, if we produce this much stuff in 1977 and this much stuff in 2012, we've produced over twice as much stuff. Our economy has more than doubled in these 35 years. All right, and that's why the real values are important. We can track changes over time and see if we're achieving economic growth. Policymakers can look at it and say, what other kind of stuff do we need to do to, get GDP growing again? So anyway, this is what I want you to look at. Nominal values are simply the dollar value at the time. Okay, and so today, if you add up everything that we produce and use the dollar value of today, it's worth 15.3 trillion. But if we take everything that we produce and pretend that it was produced in 2005, it would have been worth 13.5 trillion. So again, it allows us, putting it in real values, allows us to compare. All right, and one final note, when we look at, let me get another, when we look at deficits, U.S. government deficits, we certainly have huge, massive deficits today. Uh, I forget the exact number, but a lot of times you'll hear people say we have record deficits this year, you know, and in a way that's true, but what I want you to think of is this is nominal. All right, we don't know for something to be meaningful. If they said, adjusted for inflation, take the real deficit, uh, if that was a record, then that would be saying something because that's adjusting all the dollars uh, and pretending that all the deficits happened simultaneously in one year. And so if we had a deficit that was the highest in real terms, that would be a bad thing. But when you have politicians going after each other, they will often use this number, which is in their speeches, which is a bit misleading. So anyway, it's always about the real. You want to know what the real values are. All right, that's it for this time.